Let's start the interview. So most people watching us probably already know what Reklaim does, but just to set the stage, can you briefly explain what Reklaim is about?
Yeah, sure. So the whole genesis really about Reklaim was trying to give consumers a seat at the table as it relates to their data. And I think what any of your viewers can understand is that they have a data profile. So most consumers understand that. What most consumers also understand is that although they know they have a data profile, their access and their understanding of who has that data profile is virtually zero. So having been in the data market now for, I don't know, 20 years, we felt that there was a movement where consumers who were acting really as a free input for businesses, AI agents, et cetera, really needed a platform where they could come to a platform like Reklaim, enter an email address or a phone number where we will verify kind of they are who they say they are. And then what we do is we show them the data that is circulating on them online. We call that the unveil, and I'm biased on that, but I think we're one of the only companies in the world that does that. So just giving the visibility to the consumer on this is all the data that's out there. We then allow you to reclaim it into the ecosystem, which means it's a copy of that data that is now owned and controlled by you, at which point you can edit that data, add to that data, delete that data, and you can choose to actually then share that data directly with a brand, advertiser, platform, AI agent, et cetera, and receive a royalty or compensation in return. And in addition to that, what we also know is that there's a subset of users who want visibility on their data, but they don't want to sell their data. And we refer to that individual as the idealist. The methodology for that person is the same. We show them the data, we allow them to reclaim it, and then what we do is then we allow them to protect it. And that situation is what we do there is we monitor that person's profile on the dark web to determine whether or not they've been exposed in any data breaches. And what we also do is we actually remove them from the various different data brokers, people finder sites, and state registries that actually have their data. So simplistically, Victor, it would be, now that you've reclaimed your data, would you like us to remove it from those that actually have it? As you can likely appreciate, very few people say, no, thank you. Most people say, yes, please. That's a new product which we've introduced. And it's slightly different than kind of the compensation sell your data model, where the Protect model is a subscription where you pay a small fee. Right now it's $1 a month to actually have us consistently protect your data in the background. And the last thing I'll just say on this is that being in one bucket, meaning you can sell your data, but also protect it. It doesn't preclude you from being in the other bucket. So most people who are in Protect are not necessarily in the actual sale bucket, but a lot of the people who sell their data want to also protect their data. So hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, I have a technical question. So you scan the internet searching for my data. How do you do that?
Well, there's a few ways we do it. So a lot of companies come to us and actually bring their data to us to actually have it augmented and or consented directly by the individual. So we've partnered with hundreds of these individual companies that allow us to actually do that. And that sets the foundation specifically of what that data actually looks like. So that's the foundation of the data that currently sits under the unveil feature.
Mm-hmm. And can I be sure that 100% of my data will be deleted from the deep web?
Well, no. So because it depends on who has it. So if company A has your data and you opt into Protect, we will tell company A to remove your data and they will remove it. We have to go to company B, company C, company D, and company E to ask them to remove it as well. So yeah, I think the intention here is that your data is your data and a copy of that data is sitting in a multitude of places. And so what Protect is really sort of set up to do is to begin that process of removing it one by one. So shrinking the amount of places that it's currently located in. And I think as you look at the evolution of this product, the more and more places and the more companies that we actually remove you from, there's less probability regarding, that data being sold, arbitrage, leaked, hacked, etc. So the idea is to try to reduce the overall footprint of the consumer. But I mean, the product's been out for 2 weeks, so we haven't erased the person's profile from the entire internet. But that we'd love to be able to do that, but we haven't gotten that far yet.
What's the name of this product? Reklaim Protect.
Yeah, it's called Reklaim Protect. And so, you know, what's been happening now with Reklaim, and you know, this company's been around for 6 years, and as your viewers will know, this is a profitable company. It's a growing company. It actually makes money, generates free cash flow, operates on very high gross margins. So the overall health of the business is probably never really been better than it is today. But what we've looked at here really over the last, I'd say sort of 6 to 8 months, is we identified very early in this process that there are quite unique personas associated to individuals and their data. So this idea of somebody who wants to actually sell their data and receive compensation, I'm sure you can appreciate it, is very different than the person that does not want to sell their data and actually wants to protect it. Mm-hmm. So when we built kind of a hierarchy of the personas, on one side of the equation, we had the realist, or the individual who wants to actually wants to sell their data. On the other side of the equation, we'd have the idealist. And we have this other sort of unique persona in the middle, which is what we call the pragmatist. And the only reason I bring this up is that what you're starting to see now at Reklaim is that there's this evolution of the overall brand, where originally it was, you come to Reklaim, you sell your data, you make $5 to $10 a month, that's it. Now what we're doing is, yes, you can still do that, but you can come to Reklaim and protect your data. That's a different brand. There's a third kind of product that we have here too as well, which we believe is quite unique. It's called Reklaim Invest. And I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. But if you zoom out and you start to think about, you know, what does the future of Reklaim look like? The Reklaim brand is paramount. It sits at the top. What we believe is that Reklaim as it exists today will be probably rebranded as Reklaim Rewards, which aligns very well with that idea of compensation for your data. Reklaim Protect is for privacy, and then Reklaim Invest is for individuals that want to engage in this new product. So there's I don't want to say a fractioning of the individual brand, but we've developed iterations of the product to really appeal to these various unique personas, and we think that they're all really accretive to the business. The most obvious being the selling of your data is a profitable business, as we already know. Adding Protect, which is a SaaS-based subscription business, which is totally incremental, who knows, should add more value to the overarching Reklaim brand. And we think that this new product, Reklaim Invest, which I'm happy to kind of walk you through, is also quite unique, and we're pretty excited about that.
Can you give me more details about how Reklaim Invest works? Because as far as I understand, you are rewarding your clients with the company's stock. So if I'm your client, if I'm a Reklaim client, I can choose to receive stocks instead of money. Is it right?
It's right. So let me kind of give you the backstory on this. So how much detail do you want? This is the question, because I could go on forever. I think when this idea first kind of came up, listen, being a public company is not easy. I think everybody can appreciate that. And so when people say, why are you a public company? They often say that with the thought that it's a lot of work, it's super expensive, so on and so forth, whatever. This is my kind of second public company. And so what I would always say is that public companies are very different than running private companies. There's pros and cons to both. When I looked at this business, I think the feeling was there has to be some benefit to the product in being a public company. And intuitively, if you can find an iteration on the product that supports the public nature of the company, you by definition kind of create distance between you and any privately owned company. The other thing here too was that I had this belief that we have individuals that are investors and we have individuals that are consumers, meaning members of Reklaim. There's a lot of people who are in Reklaim that are not investors, and there's a lot of investors who are actually not individuals who participate in Reklaim. And this goes back, I mean, this kind of idea goes back even till COVID. And I remember this because I had a friend of mine over at my house who was constantly asking about the stock. And I think the stock had gone up, and so he had made more money. And what basically came out of that conversation was he was very invested in the stock. He wasn't really invested in the product, and he had made more money by being invested in the stock by actually working in the product. And that was kind of this moment for me. I'm like, wait a minute, if I can take the investor and the consumer and put them together, is there a compounding effect associated to this? Meaning, is this a 1 + 1 = 3 type of situation where the investor is now a member of Reklaim? It almost looks like it's a public market DAO where, everybody is involved, everybody has a vote, everybody is like-minded, they all believe in the vision and where you're going, because technically you're not going to buy the stock in a company if you don't believe in the vision. So this idea of, you're not selling your data now, you're really investing in yourself, that was kind of the concept. And because we actually are a public company, we have the ability to do that. Now, naturally, the challenge associated to this has been you can't just kind of roll out of bed and decide to kind of hand out stock. So I went to the TSX, I had this conversation with them, I presented this idea the way, and, credit to them. They got their head wrapped around it, and they basically said, look, this is legit and we approve it. And so, I think I kind of came back to the product team and said, look, this idea of shares for redemption, which is sort of what we call it internally, or Reklaim Invest, probably the most difficult part associated to this is getting public, check, and actually getting approval from the TSX to do it, check. I'm like, I think the two things at the front and the back, we've already done. So Joyce and others in the middle have kind of been, kind of creating this product. But, as you said, the idea around this is that you can accumulate points or dollars in the application rather than transactionally pulling them out for $5, which has no incremental value. If you actually took those shares, $5 or $10, and you actually rolled them into the stock, if you look at that, if you look at the stock over the last year or 2 years, last year the stock was up 30%. Well, again, just using the basic math, your $5 would have been worth 30% more. Your $10 would have been worth 30% more, assuming, of course, you only did that one redemption. If you looked at it the year before, the stock was up 100%. So your $5 is worth 10. So there's this compounding effect associated to it, which is very inherent and very sort of similar to this notion of investing. And so the idea with this is that, yes, you can accumulate points rather than actually taking it as, a traditional redemption. You can pledge, or you can pledge those points towards being part of a shares for redemption program. What we've built into the actual product is all the documentation that you have to make sure that you kind of check and sign to be compliant with the TSX. And then what we do is we provide these shares to you via DRS or direct transfer via a computer share, so they remain in your account. I think the idea with this, and then I'll stop talking, I swear, is that the idea with this is that if you're familiar, as you would be, with this concept of a dividend reinvestment plan, this is the Reklaim dividend reinvestment plan. It's a way for you to accumulate incremental shares in Reklaim at no cost to participate in a friction-free way to allow you to compound the number of shares that you actually have. And as far as I know, we're the only company in the world that's ever done this. And so we've run 3 iterations of this so far since January. And you can kind of, if you've been following along, you can see me kind of talking about them at the bottoms of press releases where, it's a beta program, it's an alpha program. A few sophisticated investors are like, I kind of have a feeling I know what you're doing. And so we've been doing that to try to really work out all the inefficiencies. And, now we're sort of expanding it even further. The one thing you will say is that it's only available to Canadian investors at the moment. There would be plans to actually extend this internationally if we can, but every jurisdiction has its own kind of securities law, so it's not a trivial lift to just pick it up. But this is a live product. We have approval to do it. I'm pretty excited about it, and I can kind of keep going, but I'll pause there.
Okay. Um, my question is the following: is there any risk of dilution because you are creating new shares? Should I
Good question.
get worried with that? How does that work? How do you avoid diluting a lot shareholders?
Yeah, so I'm one step ahead of you on this. So, I think if you think about the number of shares that are, so first of all, there's 116 million shares in the float. So
Hmm.
if I'm issuing, I call it 100 shares or 1,000 shares, the dilution is zero.
Yeah.
But that's irrelevant. The point being is, usually whenever I bring this up, people are like, wow, this is super cool. I love this. And then they're like, well, what about dilution? And then I'm like, oh, so there's not really any dilution, but I already have a solve for that. So if you've been following along with the various different press releases, we have what's referred to as an NCIB in Canada, which is a share repurchase program where we have the ability to actually repurchase up to 10% of our float every year. So the intention here is that we do an offset. So if we'll just use basic math, if we gave out 100 shares or 1,000 shares or 10,000 shares, we would in a corresponding move buy 100, 1,000 or 10,000 shares in our NCIB to keep the float the same, thereby eliminating any need or thoughts regarding dilution. So I'm on it. Don't worry.
Okay. You said that Reklaim Invest is currently working only in Canada. I know also that Reklaim the app works in Canada and in the US. Should investors, shareholders expect this product to be launched globally? Can it work in every country? For example, in Brazil, where I am, will I have someday the option of using Reklaim?
Yeah, so there's two things. Is the product of Reklaim going to be available in various different countries outside of Canada and US? And then there's the idea of, will shares for redemption be available in those same countries?
Yeah.
So there's limitations on different things. I would say the natural next step for us would be to take shares for redemption to the United States. I don't have a 100% clear path on how to do that yet. I thought I did, and there are some nuances associated to that just don't allow us to do it. I mean, you can't just flippantly do it you can't just start flippantly giving away securities in a jurisdiction. Like, that's a really bad way for you to get into trouble. So you have to be pretty buttoned up to make sure that you're going through all the regular, checks and balances and compliance and legal conversation. So I feel that right now it's in Canada. I'd like to believe that we can get this live in the United States. I think you should manage the expectations on that, meaning like this isn't going live in the US tomorrow, but our goal is to figure out a way to get it live in the US. I'm pretty good at figuring out how to get stuff that hasn't been done before done. So yeah, I think we will get it done. And then if we can get it done in the United States, it gives us a path to potentially look at where else can we do it. And, I think a lot of the thinking around this is logical. So as an example, like, you're an investor today, you live in Brazil, but yet you're buying either Canadian or OTC related stock. And then where are you holding it? You're holding it in a particular brokerage account. So there's a lot of nuances where, well, wait a minute, like, I'm technically listed on the TSX. I trade on the OTC. Like, why can't I do this? Like, the OTC MYID stock is basically fungible. It's part of the overarching same float. Why can't I kind of do a similar type of thing? The logic is sound, but the nuances associated to it are like, well, yes, you're right. You should be able to do it, but you have to take into consideration this and this and this and this. Every country has its own little nuances. So yeah, let's see how we do here in Canada. The goal is to get it into the US ASAP. As it relates to Protect, which is reclaim your data and protect it, the goal for that is 100% to have that international for sure, because that is a SaaS-based product that doesn't really have any dependency on somebody actually buying your data to kind of make sure the transaction actually happens. The one limitation associated to that is that the United States is by far and away the biggest data market in the world, by far and away. And part of the reason it's the biggest data in the market in the world is because it is the biggest data broker market in the world. The world of arbitrage has kind of created the data market. That doesn't exist in other markets like Canada and these other markets. There's not nearly as many data brokers. And so the idea of security and data removal is important, but it's not as drastic as it is in the US. So, and then the reclaim reward side of the equation, for the time being, I think that product is probably going to remain sort of specifically in Canada than the US for now. And I think primarily because we've got our hands full with Protect and Invest right now. And so the one risk internally is we've got a lot going on here for a relatively small company. So we have to be pretty smart around how we're allocating our time and our energy. So we'll see how we do.
Okay. So it's much more difficult to, as far as I understood, it's much more difficult to offer your product, Reklaim Protect, in countries like Argentina because you don't have such a developed data market, and you don't have lots of brokers, data brokers, as you have in the US. And that's absolutely crucial because the way you delete data from the internet is through these brokers.
Partially. I mean, I think that, again, it's the same idea that the data market in Canada is different than the United States and it's different than Brazil. It would be arrogant to assume that the product that you build specifically for, say, the United States market, you can just pick up and move to Brazil and kind of drop it down there. I mean, I'm Canadian, you're from Brazil. We've seen tons of companies do that, where there's an arrogant approach, which is like, oh, I'm just going to pick it up, move it to Canada, and it's going to work perfectly. That never works. So I think it's just more about understanding the nuances of each market. The one thing that you can take from Protect is that this idea of like data breaches and security is pervasive, and that's a global issue. It's about to get incredibly worse with AI. Data broker removal is something that over-indexes specifically to the United States, but security and data breaches is not. And so if you look at the stack of Protect, there's a component of it which is specifically around monitoring for data breaches and security. And then there's a component of it that is specifically for data broker removal. You could argue that half of that product we could extend to the world today because it's about dark web monitoring and data breaches. The other half is probably limited to the United States, but the product is going to evolve. So there'll be different iterations that will satisfy some of these other ideas that we've been thinking about regarding security and breaches.
Okay, you just mentioned AI. I understand that a major driver of growth is the wave of new privacy laws that are emerging. But AI is also a huge, a very important trend that will help Reklaim. Can you comment on how Reklaim and AI come together?
Well, inside of Protect, as an example, we built an AI engine on the back end of it. So we used Llama specifically for that. And it's really about, trying to create a personalized privacy assistant that takes into consideration really all the communication that you would typically have with an AI agent. So you're exposed in a breach. What do you do? What are your concerns? Your concerns would be different than mine. I mean, I think this is the beauty of AI. It's more bi-directional and it's more conversational in nature. Unlike a traditional website, which is kind of one way, kind of flat communication, you'll be able to, and you can go into the product today. Again, it's that the AI component is in its early stages, but you can ask questions regarding, your data, a breach that you were in, how to protect your data, what are the steps that you need to take. So I think like what's happening really is that, everything that's conversational is kind of moving to the surface. And so I think when you think about all of the products really in Reklaim, they all have an AI component associated to them. Like this notion of having a standalone application where you're sharing your data to then be compensated. If you look at the existing application today, like why can't, that whole interaction between selling your data, communicating with clients, why can't that be run through an AI agent? Why does it have to manifest specifically in an app-based, a standalone app-based product? I think, and I'm biased on this, I think the majority of applications as they exist today will basically be replaced, because they will be able to kind of be run as bots specifically inside of these AI agents. I don't think Reklaim's any different than that. And so that's part of it. So that's how we would kind of transition sort of Reklaim rewards. Same thing with Invest. Like Invest is sort of a derivative of Reklaim rewards. The reward that you're getting is an investment. A lot of the communication associated to what data is out there, what would you like to share, how would you like to be kind of rewarded, that's conversational in nature and doesn't really need the same type of, screen by screen application that's been dominant for the last 20 to 30 years. I mean, I think when you think, one last thing I would say is that the one negative around AI. So first of all, if you're building any product, you kind of have to have AI at the forefront of everything that you're doing, because if you're ignoring that, you're just falling behind. So we are doing that across the product portfolio. The one thing about AI, which I think is interesting as it relates to Reklaim, is sort of twofold. If you look at what the AI agents are doing today, they're basically consuming the web. And you could argue that what they are consuming is all the publisher's IP, all the publisher's content.
They're consuming data, personal data.
Exactly. And so you can get a sense of where I'm going here. Once they've consumed all of Wikipedia and all of the open internet, what are they going to train on? Because those platforms and those publishers, the majority of the long tail of the open web, in my opinion, is going to go dark. It's going to go bankrupt. And I've been saying this forever. So we have this sort of pervasive open web with like tons of pages and tons of publishers and tons of blogs. All of that kind of gets like when you ask a query in an AI agent, they go out, they crawl all that information and they bring it back and they summarize it for you, which means there's no reason to go to the original site, which means there's no monetization opportunity for that site, which means they've now lost all their money, which means they're now broke. So they go dark. The problem with that is like, it's almost like a virus. The AI agent is eating the thing that it is feeding. And so when all those sites are gone, or the majority of those sites are gone, what is the AI agent going to feed on? I have an opinion on that. They're going to feed on you. That's where they're going to go next. And so this idea of, personalized data that is behind paywalls or sort of unique to you, that's the natural thing that virus or that AI agent is going to need as fuel to be successful in the future. So wouldn't it be helpful if there was a product available to consumers where they were able to decide what information they wanted to share with that AI agent? That sounds eerily familiar to what we're doing here at Reklaim. And so I think the difference here is that, you're currently kind of making decisions regarding platforms and companies, but that does not preclude you from the future of deciding, whether or not you want to share it with, specific AI agents. And I think that there's an interesting kind of opportunity associated to that. So that's one thing. The other thing that I think is really important is that the AI is so strong, and you would have read this kind of in the announcement probably around Protect, is that the number of data breaches is basically doubling every year. And the ability to crack, user passwords, et cetera, is, it's getting crushed. The sophistication of AI, once combined with hackers, is just really going to make a lot of these pools of data that have, currently been hidden behind security walls, it's all going to end up on the dark web. So the security hacks are going to increase because of the sophistication of AI. And my frustration always with the security hacks and data is basically that the company that actually loses the data kind of gets fined and they have bad PR. The problem is that the consumer whose data was involved in that consumer hack, there's no removal of that data. That data is now on, in the hands of those bad actors, basically forever. So if you get hacked because you're a T-Mobile subscriber or an AT&T subscriber, AT&T says, we're really sorry. We're going to give you 3 months of Norton antivirus, and we feel terrible about it. Cool, but you as the subscriber, your data is like on the dark web forever, forever. So that's the thing where there's this disparity between kind of the companies that have the data and their sophistication in kind of keeping it secure, and sort of the ancillary impact that it has on the individual consumer. So there's a lot there as it relates to AI, security, product, data, AI agents. What are they going to feed on? I think they all kind of tie back to Reklaim personally.
So AI can create a lot of demand for Reklaim's services and products.
I think so. I mean, again, I'm biased, but I don't think we're at the situation where, the implementation or the advancement of AI makes our product or our company redundant. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think that the evolution of AI makes a company like Reklaim increasingly more important.
Mm-hmm. And talking now a little about your moat, is there anything in your company, what makes you unique? Can other companies copy you? How difficult is it to copy what you guys are doing? Do you have any kind of competitive advantage? I know that you are already the first ones in the space. That is already a strong advantage. But can you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really focus on the competitors too much. I think that I think it's the other way around. For us is one. There's not one product here, so there's multiple products here as it relates to data. And so if you want to compete against us, you got to compete against us on all these various products. As we discussed, there's limitations associated to, like, if you want to compete with me on Invest, if you're not public, you're out of the game. Unless you want to make a decision, like, in order for us to compete with Neil, we're going to first go public, and then we're going to build a product to compete against him to be second best in the market. Good luck. That's a strategy. So, I mean, I do think that, Invest kind of gives us a unique positioning in the market because there's an inherent moat around it because, obviously we're doing it. We understand our model works for Invest. We actually have all the approvals. We are already public. And, I think when you think about things like Invest, it also kind of gives us a foothold more into the fintech space, where fintech in itself is pretty noisy. There's tons of companies, everywhere from like Robinhood in the United States to kind of Wealthsimple in Canada. Robinhood is public, Wealthsimple's not. A lot of these companies, I think we have a feature or a function inside of our product that these companies currently don't have. Does that give us a foundation from which we can actually build increasingly more differentiated and carve out space? I think the answer is yes. And that's just specifically for Invest. As it relates to kind of Protect, we've seen companies do dark web monitoring. We've seen other companies do VPNs. We've seen some companies do things like data broker removal. We haven't seen one company do all of these things combined. And I think that the value that we're actually bringing there is, inherently kind of unique. Our understanding of the data market is pretty strong. And so that's how we've built that product. And then, on the traditional Reklaim reward side, this company's been around 6 years and there's been a ton of competitors. They've all gone broke. And they've all tried to do what we've done, and they've all failed, candidly. So I would argue that our competitive advantage is that we figured out how to make this model work, how to create a profitable model where others haven't. And I think that business continues to grow and will continue to grow and is actually getting better because it's got these ancillary products like Invest and Protect that are being part of it forward. So, yeah, look, competition is part of the game. I think it would be naive to suggest that you're going to own the global data market and you're going to be the only guy in the space. That's not realistic. It's an enormous market. There'll be lots of people in it, all doing a bunch of different things, but I haven't seen companies that look very similar to Reklaim. And lastly, it's really hard. So, like, if you want to try to compete, go ahead. Like, you've got to sign up for 6 years of absolute pain and misery. And if you're willing to do that, great, go for it. Most people don't have that kind of stamina. I think I'm a bit of a masochist. And so we've kind of scratched and clawed our way through that. And it's like, it's not for the faint of heart. So I can assure you, it's not easy. So it's definitely not easy. And most people don't sign up for hard, and they definitely don't sign up for hard and long. That's kind of what I would say. So,
Okay. Now, talking about your Q1 results, you reached record revenue of 5 million. How much of that revenue is recurring?
you mean Q4? You mean 2024?
Yeah,
Q1
yeah.
hasn't.
Sorry. Q4.
I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Q1 actually comes out
Sorry.
next week, so you'll be able to compare. I mean, look, the majority of our revenue is recurring. It's like 80 to 90% of our revenue is recurring. So the foundation of the business is quite strong as it relates to the number of clients and those that are coming back and actually spending more money.
Okay. Your gross margin also increased from around 77% to 81%, which is excellent. Do you see more room for this margin to expand? Would it be conceivable for this company to reach, let's say, 85% or 90% gross margin?
No, I mean, 81's good. You should kind of take that, put it in your pocket, and run away with it. Like, if we stay anywhere close to that, I think that that's good. I mean, candidly, I like even like high 70s to where we are. I mean, I don't expect the margin to go down anytime soon, but anytime people look at numbers, they always want it to go up. On the gross margin piece, I'm like, forget it. It's not going to go up. It's not going to go down. It's going to kind of stay within the range, but you're better off focusing on other metrics versus kind of hoping that the gross margin is going to expand. So, sorry to rain on that parade, but you're not going to 85 to 90% gross margin. That's not going to happen.
No, okay. 70% is already excellent, so I'm not complaining.
Yeah.
Definitely.
This one we're doing well on. So like, there's other ones, like, let's go to the other ones, because there's other ones where like we can always be expanding those. Like, let's expand the growth rate, the revenue, all those other ones. The gross margin isn't going anywhere.
Still on your financials, one expense that rose significantly was in selling and business development. And in note 14, most of it refers to salaries, benefits, commissions, contractors, and recruiting. Can you comment on what this spending is for and how it might impact the company's future growth? Should we expect it to continue rising?
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to have sellers in order to actually sell the product. If you want the product to grow, you need more sellers. And so, we invest more into the actual sales team, which allows us to actually generate more revenue and profitability on the back end. It's not a one-to-one kind of correlation for sure, but I think the idea there is people want growth. You can't have growth without kind of incremental cost. Now, making sure that your costs are not running, higher than your incremental growth, that's the key. So if you're maintaining your margins and growing the business and kind of keeping your costs in check, then you're fine. But yes, as long as the business is growing, you should be expecting kind of the head count to actually grow on the sales line for sure.
In one of your interviews, you say that you are allergic to debt. But at which scale can you take the company without taking on debt?
Well, it depends on your definition of scale. So my definition of scale is profitable scale. My definition of scale is not unprofitable scale. And so what I always tell everybody is the business will grow as fast as the cash flow permits. In this market, I'm not particularly all that interested in growing unprofitably, because that puts pressure on the business to raise capital, which creates dilution. And candidly, there's a lot of predatory capital like in the market. There's a lot of people that will happily give me money with all kinds of weird, ornery kind of conditions. We don't want that. So I think the intention is that look, I think we don't see any issues as it relates to kind of growing the business. If the business continues to grow 25 to 50% a year, generate money, generate free cash flow, then most people should just be like, we're good with that. But we're not. Yeah, I think the point is that we're not interested in growing the business just for the sake of growing the business. I'm just going to plug my computer.
Okay. And one last question. How much have you personally invested in this company, and what does it represent to you? Since it probably has a personal value beyond just money. And where do you see it going?
Oh, I've invested a lot of money in this company, but that's fine. I mean, I'm the largest shareholder in the company, so at the end of the day, and that's
the company do you have?
35%.
35.
So, yeah. So if you're investing in this company, you're with me. So like we're together. We have a vested interest in making sure that the company continues to grow, continues to actually scale. Most investors kind of like that. This is, the CEO is invested in the company and doesn't own 2% of the company. But that also sort of drives a lot of the decisioning that we make in the company, which is I'm not all that interested in a whole bunch of dilutive capital, naturally, right? So when you're the CEO and you're also the largest investor, you kind of look at it both from an investor point of view and from a CEO point of view. So you have two ways of looking at the business. Not all CEOs look at their businesses that way. If you're not the largest investor, you might make decisions differently. Look, I think I've built a lot of businesses over the year. This one has the biggest potential. So the idea of historically writing checks into this business to get it going was really based on the idea that this is a huge business. At a dollar, this is a $100 million stock. Could this be $1 billion stock? Could this be $1 billion company? Maybe. I mean, it has the potential. I'm not like flippantly trying to draw a line between this tiny micro cap and being $1 billion company. That would be ridiculous. But I think the idea here is, all right, well, every single consumer on the planet has a data profile. Nobody has access to it, and there's no tools to enable those consumers to gain access to it and option for it. If there was a company in the space that actually provided that type of optionality to consumers around the world, and we're talking about billions of consumers, what would that company or that business be worth? Mm-hmm. I can tell you it's not 7 million or 8 million or 10 million Canadian. That's for sure. So, I look at the kind of the stock and I'm like, it is what it is. I don't think people who kind of follow this stock, I mean, obviously it's a micro cap. They don't understand the longer term vision. They don't understand kind of the size of the market. They're looking at a financial statement that is reflecting on financials from 3 to 6 months ago. They don't have any visibility on like what we're doing. I do. And so I think when we started this business 6 years ago, we thought we were right, as it relates to where the market is going. Six years later, I think we're more right than we were then. So, and the business demonstrates that we're right in the sense that we actually have a legitimate business that's growing, is profitable, et cetera. So what I like about where we are right now is we're in control of our own destiny. We don't have to run around on the street to raise capital every 6 months to keep the lights on. We can hire, productize, scale the way we want without kind of a whole bunch of noise or pressure from the outside world. And I always default to this statement, but I'm like, the one thing I love about kind of capitalism is capitalists have this uncanny ability to find value. And if you keep building a business that is generating more value, sophisticated investors will come. That's it. And if you build a company that burns cash, doesn't generate any profit, and is all kind of, promotional, sure, you'll get some investors. You'll get some investors who want your stock to go from like 5 cents to $1, but they're never going to last. The types of individuals that are buying this stock, is basically like the idea that, look, you're buying part of, you're buying part of a private company. And like we are sort of like that in the sense that we're almost like a private company operating in the public market. People, some investors get frustrated with that because they're always like, you should do more promotion and you should do more news. I'm like, what do you want me to do, man? Like we're
I have
building a
a business
business.
to run.
I got a business to run. I'm like, what do you want me to do? You want me to go on like Twitter and like just post social posts all day? Like I've got other stuff to do. And oh, you'd rather I spend $10,000 or $20,000 with these IR firms, like who are gonna, kind of promote us. I appreciate that there needs to be better visibility on this company for sure. I get that. We're trying to figure out how to do that in an intelligent way, not in a promotional way. The way we're doing it now is we're trying to put more eyes on this company by actually introducing interesting product that actually adds incremental value to the business that we can actually talk about in events like this, where people are like, oh, this is interesting. This company seems to be like adding more and more things. So that's how we've been approaching it.
Okay, so I'm out of questions. Thank you so much for your time and for your interview.
Well, thank you for your thanks for holding on to the stock. Thanks for
Uh,
holding on to the stock,
well,
and
I will probably hold it for some years, I guess.
I
But
think
anyway,
I think you'll do well if you do that. I think you'll do well.
thank you so much for your time. And well, Joyce, thank you so much too.